I mean, there's, I'm sure you guys have all seen a ton of videos about Charlie Kirk's life. So much has been said about him. I've met him a couple of times. In my experience, he's been a great guy, unbelievably wise for his age. The first time I met him was in 18, maybe 2018. I was 28 years old, and I interviewed him, and I thought, okay, I thought, okay, whatever, this guy's like 40, he's like, big accomplished guy. I look it up after the interview. He was 23 years old. I was shocked. He was like gregarious. I mean, he's 6'5" too, so it kind of added to the effect. But I mean, he was gregarious, so single-mindedly focused on what he was saying. He had already built up a huge organization by then, Turning Point USA. He was a speaker at CPAC. That's when I met him. And one feeling I had that time and the subsequent times I've met him is that I really thought that this guy could be the president of the United States at some point. And the only thing that was stopping him now, besides Trump sort of taking the lead, is the fact that he was literally too young to run. For someone like him, he was either going to be the president or a contender, a serious contender for president. That was just my opinion. So it was an absolute, tragedy what happened. And I was reflecting on it after the fact, and I just thought two things really stuck out to me regarding his death. One is that the reason it affected so many people, at least one reason that came to me, was that he was a real great connector, right? Like, he was literally in the closest orbit of Donald Trump. He was like in the inner circle of Trump, the president of the United States, but yet he was still accessible at a random college, and you can go talk to him if he just came up to the microphone. So that's really unheard of. Like, who else, literally, like if you're in the inner circle of the United States president, you can't, like, usually there's so much security, you can never get a hold of him. He was actually speaking with people all the time, all over, everywhere, but he had the ear of the president. So it was almost like he was really connecting the young generation with the powerful elite. So he was really bridging that gap. So I was thinking, like, man, that's the wrong person to kill, because like if you think about it like a safety valve, like if you have all this pressure building up at the bottom and it doesn't have any way to bubble up to the top, it's like, well, that's not good. That's a recipe for disaster. But him, and I want to say people like him, but there's not really too many people like Charlie Kirk and what he was doing. Like, he was a very unique individual with especially what he built. But he could be on the college campus. You could come up to him and ask him a question or debate with him. And if you make a good point, he can actually affect policy and he can affect who gets elected. And it's like, he really was bridging that gap. So like, to kill him, it was really just, horrible. I mean, for every other reason that it was horrible, that was another one. The other reason I kind of came to the conclusion of why so much of the country is so affected by it is because, like, he's so ubiquitous on TikTok. I think, like, during the election year last year, he was, if not the most viewed creator, he was like one of the most viewed creators on across the entire TikTok platform. And I feel like his views resonate with like half of the country. And so when you're watching it, you're kind of just seeing like your view get challenging like someone on campus. You're really like seeing yourself through him, if you agree with those views, which a lot of people do. And so like when you shoot a guy just for like articulating the exact same view you hold, and all he's doing is saying it out loud and debating somebody who disagrees with him, and you shoot that guy, it almost feels like you're shooting like you, because all he's doing is just like articulating the same thing that you believe in. It's not like he's doing anything else. He's not even a politician. Anyways, those are just some of the thoughts I had. I mean, do you guys have any other kind of takeaways after considering what happened?
It was crazy. So I was actually supposed to speak at an event with Charlie like last weekend, which I had to cancel because just family issues. I couldn't make it. But it was like I was supposed to be with him at an event. Like, it's crazy. I just spoke at Turning Point. I interviewed him there not that long. I was on the main stage, and seeing that happen, it was just real close to home. It was shocking, actually.
Yeah. Cindy?
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that surprised me, everything you said, is really resonates. And, watching him have those conversations were probably a lot of conversations you wish would just happen more, because they were civil and respectful and trying to get at the heart of the matter and really, understand each other better. And I think, I think he influenced, obviously, a lot of people just through having those conversations, not just the ones having it directly with, but those who saw it on TikTok. And one of the things I was really surprised by was actually the ubiquity of the response. Like at the Yankees game, you know, having a, you know, on the Jumbotron or the big screen and having a memorial for the Yankees game, that's as American as it gets, right? And, you know, when Trump ordered the flags to be at half-mast for, you know, not just around the country, not just the White House, but the, you know, every federal office and embassies, consulates, you know, overseas. The New York Times wrote a really, I think, good. It was a good quality op-ed about it.
Disgusting. They were like telling. Oh, no, I'm thinking about not New York Times. I'm thinking about when they talk about that Ukrainian girl.
No.
But New York Times has a long history of misrepresenting Charlie Kirk.
No, I just mean
labeling
the editorial that they wrote the day after was actually good, like decent,
And
you know.
Picking up what you were saying, Roman, I met him when I was still in college. I think it was 2021 at one of his Turning Point events. I've been to every single one since. And I also got to attend a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago with him and a very small, like intimate prayer meeting that he did at dinner.
Yeah, we were there actually.
Yeah,
That's right,
Josh was there as well. It was last year or maybe
last year.
Last year. He became, like you said, like an everyman for people who shared those beliefs, young conservative activists. And one of the questions that I remember asking him, and the answer that, you know, shook me the most was, I did some college activism stuff on my campus, but nothing to any large extent. But I said, you know, not everyone can be an activist. You know, aren't you worried that kids are just going to get penalized? You know, they get a target on their back. Their peers think of them differently. You know, aren't they just going in a wrong direction if they go that way? I was kind of, you know, feeding in my own fear when I asked that question. But he said, you know, if you believe something is right, you have to say it and you have to normalize it. Because if you believe it should be normal, it really starts with you. And yeah, I just think that confidence that he inspired in people that are my age is irreplaceable. And it's such a shame that so many people in my generation and younger Gen Z and Gen Alpha won't be able to experience him at these Turning Point events because he made the entire production. Any final thoughts?
One of the former ambassadors I was speaking to, she was touching on how Charlie Kirk was a, you know, man of faith, and he could weave in stories from scripture and make it relevant to whatever the debates or dialogue currently was, and just bring that in and, you know, boldly be who he was, be a conservative, be a person of faith, talk about having families at a young age, and saying that that's okay, right, in the current environment, if we will, polarization, and kind of make it mainstream to your point. Like he did have the ear of President Trump, who saw him almost as one of his own sons, right? But at the same time, he was very accessible, and he wanted to have that dialogue, that civil discourse, and, you know, he wanted to talk to the people who disagreed with him. He's like, if you don't like what I say, great, go to the front of the line, go to the mic, and let's have a conversation. And he would try and find something about that person who was speaking and be like, you know, see who that person is, that there's something beautiful about that individual to celebrate, even if, you know, the views are completely different. Just how do we connect and how do we rebuild? And, you know, the next day was 9/11, and there's a lot of people talking about that absolute heinous day brought the nation together, right? So instead of fighting hate or violence with violence, how do we continue as Americans, right, to build and focus on the best parts of who Charlie Kirk was, right? That having that civil discourse, because he was talking about a couple years ago, I think, in one of his, you know, meet and greets, where he was saying, if you don't have that conversation, that's when you have violence. That's when you have civil war, because then these outsized sources or forces, you know, who control the narrative want us polarized. But if you can just reach out to your neighbor, be like, hey, maybe we have a different view, but what is your view? I want to hear it. We're all humans after all, right? And bringing that together. I just think it's absolutely tragic and horrific. You know, his family was there, and his daughter was trying to run towards him when she heard the shots because she was afraid.
So, okay, let's talk about what this means moving forward, because obviously there's some kind of like, there's a feeling in the air that this means something more than just like, a random murder, right? There's an obvious feeling that this is a turning point, really, right? Like as per the name of his organization. So Josh, tell us, what is this, or give us your opinion, what does this mean for the country moving forward?
I think so. What Trump actually talked about. President Donald Trump, after this happened, kind of talked about the legacy of Charlie Kirk, open debate, but also how we got here as a country. And, the killing of Charlie Kirk, comes right on the heels of probably the most outrage I've seen among conservatives probably ever. After that young Ukrainian woman was murdered on that train, I've never seen people that furious. And so Charlie Kirk now dying right after that, there's a question of how did we get here? Have we reached the boiling point as a country, and how do we go forward? Let me show you what President Donald Trump says, and we'll go from there. So this is Trump talking about it.
To my great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country. Charlie was the best of America, and the monster who attacked him was attacking our whole country. An assassin tried to silence him with a bullet, but he failed, because together we will ensure that his voice, his message, and his legacy will live on for countless generations to come. Today, because of this heinous act, Charlie's voice has become bigger and grander than ever before, and it's not even close.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So what Trump is talking about doing now is basically investigating criminally, possibly, the organizations that have been funding, pushing these narratives, politically divisive, labeling people as Nazis, labeling people in these different ways that, I think really have been used to silence people. And what is interesting is this, you have grassroots name, honestly, Trump in his own speech calls it the radical left, you know what I mean? You have normal name calling, but there's an institutionalized name calling that labels people, creates these labels, and then really does kind of advocate. I think at the most you could say censors opposing viewpoints while allowing the ones they agree with. And the ones they agree with, they allow for really radical calls for violence. People are posting I went and looked up some archives, Reddit posts and chats and Blue Sky posts. People are saying, who should be next? People are promoting assassinations. People are pointing to not even Antifa. You have even more violent offshoots now that have been allowed for a long time, trans Tifa and stuff like that, where they're openly talking about killing people. And
but
stuff.
Do remember Reddit, X, and especially some of the more fringe ones like Blue Sky. Those are very a subsect of the American populace. Even if there's a lot, even if let's say 10% of the users on there are commenting in such a way, they probably represent 0.1% of the American population.
So this is what it's getting at, though, is what is radicalizing people to the point where they believe they're doing something good by killing someone like Charlie Kirk. Mm-hmm. And it's because they've been convinced on these, narratives that somehow he's like a Nazi, and what do you do to Nazis, right? What's the right thing to do to a Nazi? Like you're in World War II. We'll see what Trump does as they investigate this and whether you can like criminally go after people. I don't know what law they would use for that. But I was curious. I went back and I was looking up how was Charlie Kirk basically labeled. The Anti-Defamation League, they did label Turning Point USA as an extremist organization. They were labeled like that. A lot of the narratives calling him like, sympathetic to like Nazis and white supremacists goes back to 2017, shortly after Charlottesville, where you did have like the alt-right and the far left fight each other. But Trump said, there were fine people on both sides, but, there were a lot of people who were terrible. They had bats and they were beating, the media misquoted Trump and then framed a fake narrative on it. Like they actually took just a small clip of what Trump said and then framed a false narrative on top of it. Then you had Media Matters piggyback on that and going after Turning Point and Charlie Kirk for years, 2017 all the way through 2024. And so, you did have a lot of people who've been labeled, canceled, demonetized, attacked, and just demonized nonstop in the media. And then you got to think of people who've been watching that. Maybe not 100% of people are going to, think violence is the answer, but you get a couple people who are mentally ill, you might.
I agree with you. I also work in the media, and we've also been demonized. So I know how that system works, and I've been following it with both Charlie Kirk and everyone else. However, I will say, I see two directions that this could possibly go after this assassination: a very negative scenario and a positive scenario. And I personally think the positive scenario will win out. So the negative scenario is that people do start digging in, like who said what, who caused this, like who specifically is responsible for this.
And you have some people who are outraged who are already doing that too.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I think that it almost, like, I hate to say it, but the proper way to move forward is, it doesn't matter how we got here. How do we move forward? Let's try as best as we can, have a blank slate. Now you might say that's impossible because they built this environment. I think it's a cultural shift that needs to happen, and it is happening, because I feel like this really was like what do you call, like a watershed moment, like the water pours out, because I think it's not that the government is going to go in and investigate who said what. America wasn't built on the government coming in to help us. It's all about civic institutions, and I feel like with this, what's going to wind up happening is that the people in the middle, not the radical left, you'll never change trans Tifa, whatever you said. Those types are ingrained in their ideology, as are the radical right. The people on the normal middle ground, the ones on, like, let's say the left side of the independent middle, they're going to look at this and they're going to go, you know what? Now we see through this. Now we see where this leads to. We're not going to listen to people who are just called Nazis blank slate anymore. Like, if you're calling someone a Nazi, you better have very, very clear reason to. So I feel like there will be a cultural shift from this. I hope. That's the positive side, the positive way this can move forward. How I feel like there's going to be a cultural shift of independence, like the country as a whole, like basically the body politic of the country moving away from radicals on both sides and becoming less politicized. That's what I hope will happen.
That happens. I hope that happens, personally.
I was just going to say, to your first point about social media and just being a subset, I think that's a good lesson for us too, because people are seeing in their feed and are going to get fed more of what they see. And I think we have to remember that it's a tiny subset of people that are on social media. You're seeing a tiny subset of what's out there. So to form your opinion on even how the world is, how the country is reacting to this, how people around you are reacting, I think it's too narrow. Like, we need to go out, as Tiffany was saying earlier, we need to actually talk to each other. And I think that's, have the conversation. Don't form your entire opinion about what the next direction is, how people are feeling about it from your, small subset of what you see on social media. Speaking of social media, I saw this one post about a guy saying his eldest son came up to him and said, "Dad, I want to wear a suit and tie to school today." And he dropped him off, and all the other kids were wearing suit and ties because they decided as a student body I don't know where this guy was or what school it is that every student wanted to wear a suit and tie to honor Charlie Kirk, but that was like kind of shocking and moving. Like I said, having a tribute at a Yankees game, like, it just showed me that this has, I think it really is some kind of watershed moment. It has had a much bigger impact than I initially expected it would. And we're watching BBC. It's been wall-to-wall coverage on this on BBC, right? So let's not, I think a good thing to do would be to help move it in the direction of what, Roman's talking about versus getting sucked into anything negative that might be around you and your social media feeds and all of that.
Yeah, and I feel like that will just naturally happen. I feel like people will naturally move away from these extremist positions more towards like a more civil discourse. And I noticed that like the media is just as a whole becoming more and more irrelevant. That especially the media when they
But not this one.
we're the new mainstream, as I say. But I'm saying like the entrenched media, like it started with the Irina story, right? Where like you go online and like it's that everyone's talking about it, like it's horrific. You go on the media and it's like, oh, it's bad, horrible killing. How the right is seizing on this horrible killing, and you're just like, okay, you just roll your eyes and you like you want to play that game, go ahead. But I feel like the whole population will just move away from that. They can, whether they want to keep doing that or they want to also like adjust themselves and move forward in a positive way. I'm talking about the media. That's their option. That's their choice. But I think the people as a whole will come together. They'll get less politicized. They'll move together forward. And media like us or other media will just rise up and we'll fill in the gap. We'll be able to present. We'll be the conduit to information that doesn't push those narratives or spin things negatively. That's I think the positive way out of here. Any final thoughts?
Well, we'll see where it goes going forward. I mean, you have had a lot of people step forward and kind of say that they're distancing from their extreme positions, but I think there does need to be, to an extent, an uprooting of the institutionalized systems that have justified this. We got to be honest with ourselves. We came out of the last decade, basically, where in Common Core education, kids are being had their heads stuffed with these racial hate narratives, basically. And so I do think we need to start uprooting these divisive narratives from our systems.
Couldn't agree more. So yeah, whoever's watching this at home, I would just I would take the best positive lesson you could from Charlie Kirk. The guy was 31 years old when he died. By the age of 31, he had built Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, the largest or one of the largest grassroots political organizations in the country. He was an absolute fierce, conservative without any qualms, he was just very courageous with going out there and telling people what he thinks and why he thinks it. He was deeply committed to his faith, and he was very, very forward with it, and he actually lived it out in the real world, not just talked about it. And to me, I just remember from the very first time I met him, I just reevaluated my own life because I just looked at him and I thought, I have a lot of limiting notions in my own head about what I can and cannot do. But you look at a guy like him and it's like by the age of 31, he accomplished so much, and he did it all in a positive way, right? He accomplished so much in a positive way. So I feel like let's take a real positive lesson from his life and move forward in a positive way. So. All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow and also check out either these videos or maybe they're on this side. I don't know which side they're on, but we set it up. So these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side, and until next time.